Good morning. It's so nice to see everybody. Reverend Ed sends his best wishes to you all this morning as he takes an unexpected Sunday off to continue recovering from the inner ear surgery. If you would like to send him well wishes while he's healing, you can do so through his email address, and I'm sure he'll appreciate reading your messages once he's feeling a bit better. If you have an immediate need, please reach out to one of the staff so we may assist. Okay. As I join you here this morning, I'm still feeling a bit of extra peppiness after having a most excellent spring break a couple of weeks ago. We took our youngest, Willa, down to Disney World for a somewhat delayed high school graduation trip. Now, we are huge Disney fans, and Disney World is one of our favorite places to visit. Quite simply, it is the best, most expensive commercial we've ever paid for. And we're always happy to do so. We camped at Fort Wilderness this time, and that's Disney's version of a campground. The tent sites are roomy and have both water and electricity conveniently located right beside the tent pads. The bathhouses are sparkling, and they smell fantastic. I'm completely serious. They smell fantastic. I think they pipe the smell in from somewhere. There's wildlife all over, and you can fish in the canals that run through the campground, and biking is the preferred way to travel back and forth to the pool. Yes, friends, I bike while I'm at the Disney campground. It's not pretty. But everyone magically pretends not to look as they give me a lot of space. All right, y'all ready to go? Yes? No? Well, it's not everybody's brand of happy, but if you ever want to go with me, we'll do it. My favorite cousin, Marshall, and his wife, Deb, they camped with us. Now, Marshall will tell you that he's my only cousin. But it's a plain fact that it doesn't matter how many cousins I may or may not have, Marshall is by far my favorite. We mostly grew up together in my grandparents' house. I say mostly because while my mom, sister, and I moved in more or less permanently with my grandparents when I was very little, Marshall came mostly during the summertime and sometimes for holidays. Marshall is probably the most open and honest person I've ever known. He has no guile, no artifice. There's no meanness in him, not a speck. He's accepting of others, generous and giving. He's funny and he's clever, and he's very easy to talk with. We favor a lot in our looks. We both have freckles and our hair is the same color. It's a toss-up each time we're together as to whose hair will be longer. Our eyes are different though. Mine are a swamp water green and his are a beautiful deep brown, plus he's taller. During our week together, we talked about how long it had been since we'd seen each other last, how COVID has affected so many parts of our lives, how hard it's been to feel that disconnected from one another. It hadn't been this long between visits, nearly 4 years, since our very young adulthood. During our teenage years, Marshall bounced between his parents, back and forth a few times, and we lost touch with one another. We reconnected in our early 20s one Thanksgiving. He was living in Gatlinburg, and I was tired of having my parents compete for time on holidays. Friends, there are plenty of days in a year. Why would you want to fight over a handful of them? I realized that I was also deeply missing Marshall, so I tracked him down. It's real fun to get tracked down by me. And then I invited myself to go up and spend the holiday with him. This reconnection with Marshall was like coming home. I just feel and do better if I can have a visit with Marshall about once a year. Much past 18 months, and I start to feel, you can't hear me? All right, thanks, Riley. All right. I was told a long time ago not to touch that thing, so I don't touch that thing. All right. Much past 18 months, and I start to feel off. It's a little hard to put into words, but that time with Marshall is like a grounding wire. A grounding wire is a safety wire that has intentionally been connected to Earth. The grounding wire does not carry electricity under normal circuit operations. Its purpose is to carry electrical current only under conditions that would be potentially dangerous. So that time with Marshall acts as my recentering or a hard reset, if you will, allowing me to re-find my place of peace and self-acceptance and the ability to move on through the world in a solid place once again. Of course, we kept in touch during the pandemic using the big T technology, but it wasn't the same. We lost a lot. We have all lost a lot. I kind of wallowed in that for a while, longer than was strictly necessary and probably longer than was healthy. But I'm forgiving myself for that wallow. Wallowing helped me stay resilient. Resilient. Now, that's a word I've heard and used more during the pandemic than probably any other time in my life. My ability to be resilient is stretched thin. My reserves are low. Collectively, our reserves are low. And so we must rebuild those reserves. We must refill our storehouse. Together, we must return to the well. But that return need not have only one path, and that rebuilding may take more than one shape. Yesterday, Karen and I were talking about the word pivot. That's another word that I've heard more during these 2 years of pandemic than all of my other 50 years combined. Pivot, pivot, pivot. If I have to pivot one more time, I'll be dancing. I kind of like dancing. A pivot turn in dancing is when the dancer's body rotates about its vertical axis without traveling. All right, Catherine has seen us. You know all about this, right? All right, so that's right. Like, it just... We're all dizzy right now. In some dance genres, pivot turns have specific names. Like in ballet, a pirouette is a type of pivot turn. Can you even imagine a ballet without a pirouette? Or life without dancing? What about that big dance happening right now, the NCAA basketball tournament? Good pivot techniques can change the outcome of one of those games. Watch some clips of Michael Jordan if you want to see some good pivots. Y'all, we pivoted real good. And that's something that we can feel really, really good about. I have never personally identified with the machine so much as I have with my laptop during the pandemic, especially back towards the beginning when I would try to get logged into Zoom, and that was back when it was all completely new to me and seemed much more like a bag of magic tricks than technology. I'd be trying to get in a meeting, and in the middle of the laptop screen, there would be this little circle spinning with the word connecting, next to it. And I'm all but pulling my hair out and yelling at the laptop, "Bro, me too!" Then making some crazy promises like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's me, not you. Not you. If you'll just help me out this one time, I promise that I'll run all the updates and I'll log in 10 minutes early next time." Like that was going to work. All right, you all talk to your laptops too, right? No? All right, just me. All I can say is thank God, thank the universe, thank Karen Armstrong, the tech team, and Eric Wan, the founder and CEO of Zoom. So now we're pivoting again, and that's good too. The thing about the pivot is that it doesn't have to be a 180 or 360 degree turn. The ability to pivot is good. Using good techniques to pivot is liberating. Good technique creates a solid foundation for growth, reduces the effort needed to make a move or a change, and it reduces the chance of injury. These handy tips come straight from The Benefits of Good Salsa Turn Technique by Robin Campbell, but I think that they're amazingly applicable to the shifts that we've made and that we continue to make while maneuvering through a pandemic. While that initial pivot got the job done, it was a little shaky. We weren't solid on the fundamentals. It took a bit to find our footing when we first shifted to virtual worship, virtual forum, and pretty much virtual everything else. Staff, lay leaders, members, friends, visitors, we were all over the map in terms of our familiarity and comfort level with using technology. Our equipment was as diverse as our knowledge base. It took a while for us to build that foundation of common knowledge and to assess and begin to fill the technical needs, especially for equipment. Our technique, our foundation, is much more solid today than it was 2 years ago. And we're pivoting a little slower these days than we did back then. And that too is a good thing. I think that this slower incremental pivot demonstrates that we're mindful of Campbell's last point, that good technique reduces the chance of injury. A hard, quick 360 pivot back to the old business as usual pre-pandemic model may hold some appeal, but it shows some cracks when held up to the light. We live in a world of uncertainty and imperfection. Touch deprivation wears on our whole bodies and minds and has affected and continues to affect many more people than we might realize. There have been a number of studies and experiments, some of them pretty horrific, that demonstrate what we know both intuitively and through lived experience, that human touch is a powerful, life-sustaining, and life-saving force. The absence of it can have truly devastating consequences, altering the patterns of our brains and changing our personalities. Human touch has been shown to lower a patient's heart rate and calm their anxiety. And although most effective when the skin-to-skin contact is with someone known to the patient, consensual contact with any person, even one completely unknown to the patient, is beneficial. If we know this, and we do, what then are we called to do by our mission, by our covenant? If we know, and we do, that close contact with someone who is immunocompromised or unvaccinated, as are our children under 5, if we know that that contact increases their risk of contracting COVID, what then are we called to do by our mission, by our covenant? Zoom fatigue is real. There's something about that virtual format that makes it physically, cognitively, and emotionally taxing, especially after prolonged use. It has without a doubt been a lifeline, and it has taken a great toll. How do we make that next incremental pivot carefully? How do we use good technique to give folks who need to rebuild their resources and their reserves through in-person contact? How do we give them what they need while keeping that virtual lifeline open and nurturing good connections with folks who aren't ready or just aren't able to cut the virtual cord? How do we go a step further and take the in-person connection that we find here in this physical space out to folks who need it but cannot physically come here themselves to get it? Well, we're certainly doing some of that already thanks to our care committee, our lay ministers, and other members and friends who are making home and hospital visits, who are reaching out every day to members and friends who haven't been in this physical space for a while. One of the truly beautiful things about the pivot technique is the piece about rotating without traveling. We can take in that 360-degree view and then make a deliberate and tactical decision about which direction we want to go before we make our move. With permission, I share Reverend Robin Landerman Zucker's message, Returning to the Well, which she presented to the Beacon Unitarian Universalist congregation at their ingathering and water communion just this past September. As is the case in many old folk tales, a man sets out one day on a journey. He is lonely in his village, and he yearns for a new home and a new community. Having filled several flasks with water, he straps on his worn leather sandals and heads off alone down a dusty road. Just as his water supply begins to run low, he arrives at a village, and there, at the well of water in the center of the village square, he comes upon a group of people. They are all obviously thirsty and parched, but they're not drinking from the well. When he inquires about this oddity, he learns that the villagers are, for some mysterious reason, unable to bend their elbows, and so they cannot lift the water dipper from the well to their own lips and quench their own thirst. Puzzled, he fills his water flasks and presses on from this strange and unhappy place. He passes several other outposts, but for one reason or another, he finds none of them welcoming. As night falls on the third day, the man finds himself approaching yet another well and yet another dusty village. Once again, he encounters a group of people who are thirsty and parched, and they too, mysteriously, are unable to bend their elbows in order to satisfy their own thirst. Yet this time, as the traveler stood on the edge of the human circle, he observed something remarkable. Each person, in turn, filled the dipper with water and then held it to the lips of his or her neighbor. With straight arm, filling the dipper was awkward. Water spilled on one another and on the ground. But the village's collective thirst was quenched. The traveler joined the circle. They made room. When his turn came, cool water met his lips. Then he grasped the water dipper, turned to his neighbor, and held up the dipper so that the next might drink. He decided then and there to make this his new home. As Unitarian Universalists, as unique individuals, as human beings, we thirst for many different things. And we yearn for places like our fellowship where we can acknowledge and even share our thirst for spiritual deepening, for self-discovery, for challenge and comfort, for healing and laughter, for connection, deep, true connection. In a parched and isolating culture, and especially after so many months in COVID separation, we seek out the well of this community because here we hope to be able to tell the truth about our lives and our beliefs, our suffering and our joy, our loneliness and our zest for living, and that in turn, our thirst for authenticity, connection, and relationship will be satisfied. The poet Robert Frost has written, "Here are your waters and your watering place. Drink and be whole beyond confusion." We can't guarantee that confusion, spiritual and intellectual or otherwise, will forever be removed from our lives by participating here at the fellowship. The pandemic is a very bold and certain example that nothing is certain. Yet, I hold faith that if we can continue to gather around this well, as we have for so many years, and if we pledge to hold the water dipper to one another's lips and to the lips of those in need beyond this place, we can move towards a greater wholeness together, one shaky sip at a time. Fed by sacred wells and by the streams of our own compassion, we are the well. We are the water, we are the dipper, we are the giver, and we are the receiver of refreshment. That's why we're here. We're here to support one another. We don't need to go it alone. And simply by coming here this morning to this watering place of wood and glass, of computer screens and keyboards, we have made the choice not to go it alone. And that's an important and courageous choice in a landscape of growing disconnection and divisiveness. I started out this morning by sharing a bit of my personal loss during the pandemic, and I know that everyone gathered here today, in all the ways that you are gathered here today, have experienced your own losses. Deep, sharp, cutting losses made all the more painful because of our isolation and distance from our community. We need a time together to uplift and hold and mourn those losses collectively. Y'all remember my favorite cousin Marshall back from about 6 pages ago? Unitarian Universalism and this congregation share something in common with Marshall. Well, besides me. Those grounding wires I told you about, like Marshall, Unitarian Universalism and this congregation act kind of like a grounding wire, connecting us directly to earth, to safety, to one another. Now, I don't mean that nothing bad will happen. What I mean is that we have a way to ameliorate some of the worst of the bad that happens. And we have a place of care to hold what can't be deflected. Friends, life is infinitely complex and fascinating, even with such tremendous loss. There has been tremendous joy and cause for celebration in our silos during these past 2 years. It's time now, too, to hold those up. To hold those up in celebration with our community. 2 personal joys are centered around my children. First, the deeper relationship that my husband, Matt, and I have been able to develop with our youngest child, Willa. We have come into a more complex understanding of one another and truly cherish this gift of time and togetherness during the pandemic that has allowed us to find this place together. And second, my oldest child, Alex, reconnected with her longtime love, Jacob, and they will be married later this spring. There's something to be said for calling a friend on the phone and telling them that you'll be dumping your kid at their house in 30 minutes. I conclude today with the same poem that Reverend Zucker shared at the conclusion of her in-gathering sermon. It's The Fountain by Denise Levertov. Don't say there is no water to solace the dryness of our hearts. I have seen the fountain springing out of the rock wall, and you drinking there. And I too, before your eyes, found footholds and climbed to drink the cool water. Don't say there is no water. That fountain is there among its scalloped green and gray stones. It is still there and always there with its quiet song and strange power to spring in us up and out through the rock. So may it be. May our waters flow and mingle in this watering place of wood and stone and glass and screens and keyboards and love and connection. Thank you.